Well, a bill passing with such a strengthened nuclear component could help resuscitate the U.S. nuclear industry, which has been stalled since the late 1970s, especially after 3 Mile Island. But while that plant was home to one of the world's most infamous reactor accidents, it also houses another reactor that's been running for 35 years. And now plant owner Exelon Nuclear is preparing to run TMI for several more decades. Clean Skies' Tyler Suiters is here now with a look at what's going on inside one of the reactors there. And Tyler, you've seen these components up close.
This was 6 months ago, Susan. It was also overseas in France. We're talking about 2 steam generators that are now on site here in the U.S. at 3 Mile Island. These were manufactured in France, shipped and delivered by Areva, the operating company here, and we toured their facilities in France back in April. And I want to take you inside and show you exactly just how large these parts are. This is the Chalon-Saint-Marcel plant. Manufactured here, heavy components, steam generators, pressurizers, reactor vessels, all 4 nuclear reactors, really around the world. A lot of these go toward domestic use, of course, given France's reliance, heavy reliance on nuclear generation for electricity. But now Areva is exporting more and more around the world. But we actually saw the TMI generators as they were being manufactured. What you see here, the finished parts, shrink wrapped for protection. Even though these are heavy metal components, they are somewhat delicate and there is precision involved. And when you think about transport across an ocean, you have to protect this metal for corrosive sea air. Another issue, the transport of these things within the facility itself. This is one of the huge bays at Chalon-Saint-Marcel, leading to the plant's shipping dock, which sits right on the Saône River. There's also an indoor rail system, and Areva says these parts can weigh up to 500 metric tons. Clearly, moving them is a slow and deliberate process. Among the reactor vessels we saw there, Susan, being shipped around the world, one for Flamanville in France, one for Olkiluoto in Finland, also one for Taishan in China. But as we said, shipping is the preferred transport, the easiest way to get from point A to B.
That's the best way for shipping is the obvious choice, but to get from the port to the site, you still need to go over land.
In this case, right, for the TMI delivery, this was from France across the Atlantic into the heart of Pennsylvania. Each of these generators, according to Areva, is 73 feet in length. That poses some problems, but this is the real eye catcher here. More than 1 million pounds in weight per steam generator. We're talking about 510 tons. And yes, it did have to go over land. Here is a look at exactly where this land transport took place. The shipping came up the Susquehanna River, stopped at Port Deposit, Maryland. That's where this was offloaded, and the land journey began up to 3 Mile Island, Pennsylvania. 75 miles is the length of the trip over land. The time, 3 weeks and 2 days. Let's take a look at exactly how big this is. This is the steam generator, one of them arriving by barge, as we said, the typical mode of transport there. But once this was loaded onto these transports on the ground, the speed was roughly 2 miles an hour. That guy in front, I mean, that's a slow walk, and he's outpacing these. The convoy here occasionally reached 2 miles in length, traveling through the Maryland and Pennsylvania countryside. The crew on hand, about 100 people each and every day for this. Each of the transports, which you see here, this is one just coming into your picture, with 1 steam generator on board. This weighs about 825 tons. We're talking about 53 feet in length. And here's a good example of the complication, simply turning a corner. This is what, a 90-degree turn? It's easy to make in your car when you have this kind of sized vehicle. And one bed, we counted this, one bed there includes 48 wheels, 12 axles, turning simultaneously, and it takes 2 beds to get one of these generators across. Also a problem, clearance, as you can imagine. Those things are 24 feet in the air. Most bridges around your town, what, 13, 14, 15 feet of clearance? So utility wires and traffic signals had to be moved or raised. The route had to be carefully designed. In fact, several thousand of the wires and signals had to be moved along the 75-mile route. And a pretty good perspective, Susan, comes from George Beam, who is COO at Areva. He said quite simply, this was the most challenging large component delivery in Areva's history. And they've been doing this for 30-plus years.
Pretty challenging for any cars that are stuck waiting for that thing to get by, huh?
Well, you're cleared forever.
It goes about as fast as my dad used to drive.
It's interesting. There are some crowds that lined up to take pictures of this procession, and it's just creeping along so slowly. But I think it's the size that really catches your attention.
So let's talk about the destination, 3 Mile Island. Of course, Clean Skies News was there for the 30th anniversary in the spring, but we're talking about a different reactor altogether.
Right. The accident was at TMI Unit 2. That was back in 1979. What we're talking about, these replacement parts going to, is TMI Unit 1. And this was opened back in 1974. 2 steam generators, as we said, going toward a pressurized water reactor, 852 megawatts. Steam generators, these are the replacement parts that are most frequently moved in and out just because they handle the boiling water. It's a corrosive element. The replacements have become routine for plants to run 60 years as they extend their lives. The process used to take nearly a year for replacement. Now it can take as little as 2 months. As for the TMI going forward and Unit 1, pardon me, Exelon Nuclear owns this. Back in January of 08, it applied for a 20-year operating license extension. The current extension expires in 2014. The NRC back in June issued its final supplemental environmental impact statement for TMI-1. In September, the NRC issued the final safety evaluation report. In both cases, the NRC said, quote, no open items that would preclude license renewal for an additional 20 years of operation are visible. So both of those reports went through, Susan, and if the NRC approves the license extensions overall, the final step here, TMI-1 with its new steam generators would be covered through 2034 in terms of operation, so another 25 years.
Right, an accomplishment in itself that could help the nuclear renaissance.
Right, especially it's such an iconic plant, one that was held up by so many nuclear opponents as what can go wrong. Again, that was an accident where there were no direct deaths attributed to that accident back in 1979. So to have that approved and running again in every year of a clear safety record means more and more to the cause of U.S. nuclear energy.
Now, we were talking with John Rowe yesterday, who is the CEO of Exelon, at Harvard at an American Academy of Arts and Sciences panel on energy. He's calling for something like 25 to 30 new nuclear reactors over the next couple of decades. But I imagine a lot of these massive parts might still come from overseas. I mean, the U.S. is not in any condition to become a manufacturing hub anytime soon.
Not yet. Well, it depends to some degree what kind of nuclear incentives are in the climate bill, I'd imagine. But Areva is foreseeing that. That's part of the reason we were at that Chalon-San Marcel plant, is that an identical one, or nearly identical, a twin plant for manufacturing these heavy components, is now in the process of being constructed here in the U.S., in the area of Newport News, Virginia. A large facility. Groundbreaking took place earlier this summer. The leader of Areva was here in the U.S., touting the economic benefits for the area, but also the fact, Susan, that as you mentioned, these parts could be manufactured domestically. But Areva was clear about the fact that if the U.S. renaissance does not take place in the nuclear industry, all these parts that were manufactured here, these heavy components, they could be shipped to Flamanville, France, Taishan, China, to Olkiluoto, Finland as well. So even though they're made in the U.S., they may not stay here.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. Tyler Suiters, thank you.
Certainly.